Hello, Sandy.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. Actually, a lot better than this morning. I was a bit groggy this morning.
I'm just looking at the Discord for a second. Jonathan won't be able to make it. Okay, no problem. Understood, Jonathan. And Antonio's running a little late. All right. In the meantime, well, perhaps Bill or Lynn want to join, and anyone else, of course, could join as well. Talk to me about your question you had about on the Discord you were talking about. So you posted this thing from the Bnei Noah, and it was talking about in Hebrew it's called the chutzpah, right? The chutzpah of the audacity of the generation. It's actually something we spoke about a little in. Funny enough, I think we spoke about it in our intro. I actually want to see. I'm just going to look at one of our old notes. I think in our intro. In our intro. Is that not our intro? Why am I not finding it right now? It's not opening up. Whatever. Either way, talk to me about your question.
It was just, and it was the app that we had, the one that is a lot in Spanish. So
Right.
One of the English portions, and I was a little bit surprised by within the context in the churches I went through. There is a style of praying where you feel like it's really demanding things of God, and they had used that phrasing in that particular article that they wrote. And so I was curious about that, in the sense of there's a lot of direction in how to live and how to pray in both the Jewish and the Noahide context. So demanding things of God is not something that I had particularly, it's not something that I had seen as really being something that would be looked on favorably. So, and yet at the same time, I know from personal times of prayer that we are allowed to plead with God. We are allowed to bring things before God. There can be intensity, but I'm not relating intensity to seeing it as a place of, so therefore we demand this. So I just wondered if you could fill in some context around that.
Got you. Okay, so first off, it wouldn't be your default mode, right, to be demanding from God. Obviously, we know about tense conversations that Abraham had with God, right, in Sodom, and that Moses has with God, right? So it's not necessarily they're not necessarily demanding. Hello, Lynn. I hope all is well and you're having a productive week. It's not necessarily demanding there, but definitely, like the name Israel, we're there to wrestle with God. With regards to the demanding, that is sort of it's a bug that they are basically turning into a feature, right? And they're saying that as we get closer to redemption, this audacity kicks in, and the different rabbis have different explanations of how they see this audacity. Rabbi Cook sees the audacity as secularism, and all the way, he sees it as the heel of Messiah, son of Joseph, and he gives that's how he explains that theological understanding. With sort of the fact that the mystical traditions of Kabbalah were not, and there's a difference between Kabbalah and mysticism, but for right now, I'm just using those terms similarly, and how there's a tension that we have today when we look at seemingly dated mitzvot, right, commandments, that don't seem to fit our moral understanding, modern moral understanding. And that tension of this audacity is the secular world demanding that the sacred match the morals that we know today. And he says while that is we should be able to appreciate that need from society, where the society basically feels this tension where we want to live a moral life and we want to live a sacred life, but yet there's a disconnect where we are right now. And he blames this on the fact that there was less of a focus on studying Kabbalah, which is supposed to bridge that gap or give a bigger understanding. Either way, that audacity now that it's there, it's in the ether, right? We're saying we're in this stage right now where there's audacity, and like this is reference with regards to like different verses in the Bible of why we'll see this audacity. The idea is like now that we already recognize ourselves as having audacity, we might as well demand things from God, right? Because we're saying now we're in this stage where he's expecting us to act this way. So we want to utilize the quote unquote evil inclination and raise the divine sparks in it. So I'm going to use that part of me that feels the audacity that allows me to demand even from the maker, but I'll demand that he returns to us. I'll demand that he redeems us, right? So, and in that sense, can you really be mad at the son for, imagine your child demanding you educate him properly, like, right? Like, don't leave me, love me more. And you'd be like, but you're being demanding, but like, right, but I'm demanding properly. So,
I love the word audacity. I understand the word audacity. And your answer is pinging off some, actually a couple of conversations I had this morning with people in my community. And one of which was around systems and structures. And somewhat things like we see here, where I was trying to think how to answer that one as well, because somebody who had worked in a lot of systems and structures, capacities and jobs, and sort of at one point said, the first thing we need to do is to, tear them all down. They're all horrible. And I was like, well, yes, but no, because there's underlying structures. I'm like, no, structures aren't, it's the same question. Where is that fine line between being obnoxiously demanding and having audacity and approaching it in the correct way? And, and so I had brought up God, and this person said it's not that they don't believe in God, but a lot of the things that we as people have done around, both the like various like faith connections and secular life is we've really screwed some of it up, so I'm thinking, so these are things that kind of are places where I do have actual conversations with people in real life. And I keep thinking, no, I can see that there's a principle of some kind. It's that matter of how do you convey it. And
my son will sometimes respond to me like I'll say something and then he answers back with some sass, but I'm more impressed by the fact that like he stood his ground and used logic to explain to me like why he wants it. And then at that point, I'm like, you know what? Sure. Like if you like the fact that you did that and you actually proved me wrong in this case, then I appreciate that kind of audacity, right? Because like you're like, no, old man, like you're not understanding. Like that's not what mom and I discussed. I was like, okay, I get that. So again, I want to believe God is looking down, smirking, being like, okay, like if you guys are gonna like demand that way, and in a certain sense, he's also asking, Shuva elai v'ashuva elechem, return to me and I'll return to you. Now we ask from God, Hashivenu Hashem elecha v'nashuva. We say, God, return us to you and we will return, right? But he's asking from us, return to me.
I have a question because it's hard. It's hard shifting my mental gears from a Christian context to this context where I'm like, yeah, I think there's a verse about that. But that sense of I've always actually told people I think God laughs at me a lot because there's a kind of delight that you experience with your son, and which I think you're right, God probably experiences with us in certain instances where, is there a verse that kind of goes, okay, come on, try me, but in a healthy way, where it's like, just see if you ask me, just test me and see what the answer is, because I want you to learn this skill of how do you, it's that sort of approach withdrawal thing of how do you get this right? Try me, come on, let's have the conversation. Is there actually imagining a verse, or is there something?
No, well, I'm saying one of them would be return to me and I'll return to you, right? The demanding of like, it's a tango, it's a dance, right? Like I need you. I mean, I say that like, Jacob and I will disagree on this obviously, but I say like God God's move, right, of like, allowing us to return to the land is him saying like, now it's your move, Israel. Like after 2,000 years, you're back in your homeland. Like I say, we sing this song when we read the Passover Haggadah, the story of the Exodus, and there's a song we call Dayenu, which means it would have been enough. And we say, if God took us out of Egypt, it would have been enough. If he just got us to the Mount Sinai, it would have been enough. And I always say, like, okay, so he did all that and allowed us to survive and brought us back to the land and made us a superpower over here. So like, at what point are we going to be like, it's enough? But like, or are we just constantly demanding, no, what we want is like the most real with the temple and the Messiah all in a ribbon, brought to us. And my attitude is why at some point God could say like, no, I did give, and I did give and give and give. Now for the last step, you make the last step. You come to me now. Show me that you really want this.
See, and the interesting thing why I say I absolutely love that saying. I love that song. And yeah, I'm not Jewish. Israel is not the home I'm returning to in the sense of the, like the sand, like the place in that same context. But there is that way in which anywhere in life, when I look at some of the things that I've lived through and been through, and like I don't remember if it was something I wrote or something I read. There was a place where the phrase joy and sorrow intertwined kind of represents this to me. That concept of you always lean towards the joy, but on the way, all of these places that kind of interact, it would have been enough. And I have so much, even the conversations I had with people this morning where you're trying very hard to convey relationship. It's about relationship, really, that sense of it would have been enough. In the places where I feel like there are things that God brings in as opportunity. I only had these conversations because they plow the law on Tuesdays here, and I woke from a bad dream and I had a meltdown. So I went early to a place that hosts a community luncheon, and I'm going to start volunteering there. So like, there's all of these things where I really have this strong belief in God's presence actively in our lives on a day-to-day. And it's that place of the day-to-day that allows me to say, even with all the tears, I actually made a friend cry this morning because we were revisiting some of the tear places. And yet, even in the places we were both reminiscing about loss, we were remembering the joy. And so it's that, for me, that sense of it would have been enough, because there's always a because why it was enough. There's always that sense. So yeah. And there's a challenge there. So I get what you're saying about Israel. There's that sense of you can't have the joy without participating in the sorrow, and you can't get past the sorrow without participating in the joy. You have to step up to both.
I'll mention something and we'll dive into chapter 6, but
Yep.
Unfortunately, I mentioned this in the past, how I have a few family members that were killed in terrorist attacks or like in wars. And my uncle and cousin were unfortunately killed in a terrorist attack. And my grandfather was giving the eulogy in the funeral home. Like 10,000 people came to the funerals. It was very intense. The cops had to quickly remove all the people off the roof of the funeral home because they thought it was going to collapse.
Oh my goodness.
So, Either way, my grandfather was speaking, and they aired his eulogy in English, like on all the radio. Like they didn't translate it. It was just in English in Israel. But he mentioned, and it stuck with me. He said, talking to like the family, he said, we've been here. I guess at the time it was like already like 30 years plus. And now it's already been 50 years. It's been 20 years since then. But he said, we've been here 30 years plus. He said, and our family Hello, sir. And
hello.
We can't assume we could just continue to walk through the raindrops. At some point, we have to do our share. And he looked at it as in, like you were just saying, like there's the joy of us being in the land. There's the sorrow which comes with, the land has its demands. And his attitude was like, that doesn't mean we give up and that doesn't mean we stop. We just have to recognize that this, unfortunately, is part of life. And this is also why when someone dies, we say, Baruch Dayan Emet, which is blessed he, the judge of truth, right? So we're not saying like, thank you for removing my uncle, but thank you. I believe that this is truth. This is what's supposed to happen. And on that morbid note, we'll jump into chapter 6. Antonio, before we get cracking, are you doing well? Did you have a good week?
Yes, I did. I was actually going to try to have the lady on, but the kiddo woke up and yeah.
All I'm hearing is excuses. Okay.
Yeah.
No, that's obviously the priority. And how old is your daughter/son?
He is 7 months now. Well, actually, yeah, 7 months.
The most amazing thing in the world. Children, that is, but okay. Chapter 6, La Familia, the family. Sandy, do you want to take us through these verses first?
Sure.
This is not such a long chapter, so I think we'll be able to go with it fairly quickly, but it's still, nevertheless, very interesting.
God created man in his image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply. Fill the earth and subdue it. Genesis, I'll just read. The man said, this at last is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. This shall be called woman, for from man was she taken. Therefore man shall leave his father and his mother and cling to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. And the man called his wife's name Eve, because she had become the mother of all living.
Okay, so I'm sure we are all familiar with these verses. Beautiful, beautiful verses. Now, while I'm going to speak about it in a sense from like a physical and factual matter, it's important to remember that in our tradition. Sorry for a second. Okay, in our tradition, we are also told that the story of Adam and Eve and the Garden of Eden is metaphysical, metaphorical in certain ways. So like we have to be able to handle both those tensions as well. But for now, we'll talk about this, assuming these are, or believing that they are true, obviously, in some level that we could relate to. So first off, just some notes, things to discuss about these verses. It's very clear that there's the commandment to be fruitful and multiply, right? So obviously, with no hidden terms, this is talking about procreation, sex. We are very for it. We are very pro it. That's how this game continues on. So this is coming out definitely against celibacy, right? That's not what we're interested in. There are even ramifications to this, obviously, in marriage. If a wife is barren, that is grounds for like a divorce as well. Obviously, we don't want to go in that way, and we understand why someone would still want to stay with his wife. And there's adoption. But the idea is that is clearly one of the things that we are doing as well. One of the main things we're doing as well. Another point to note, and again, we don't have to get too deep into this specific conversation, but we mentioned over here about being fruitful and multiply. So these two things generally mean being fruitful is the quality, and multiply is the quantity, right? So there's the fruit, which is there's the seed, but we need to make sure the seed could actually turn into an edible fruit, right? So we're talking about the quality of creation, and we see this sort of go astray when we have the daughters of men and the sons of God. When they have their relations, we're being told that they don't have daughters and sons, but they only have daughters. And the idea there is to symbolize how it was they were multiplying, but they were not being fruitful. And there was an issue over there as well. And later on, it corrects itself. But it's just a little element with regards to looking at those two words. We always want to be, doing both. Another thing to note, which is we mention, one second, in which verse is it? And 1 second. God created him. Second, the man said this. Okay, this at last. Okay, this at last is a strange. What does that mean? This at last. What was before that? So there's different interpretations. Some say that Adam first tried his luck with all the animals first. Pretty intense, right? So that didn't necessarily work out. I don't know if that's where AIDS started, but I'm just saying like that's not where that wasn't very successful. Some say that there was already some attempt of procreation, but at that time the relationship was just physical. There was nothing spiritual there, and that's why we see it as unsuccessful. And we talk. And the context is at this at last. At this point, now there was another spiritual element to this, where we could actually reach what we want to be doing. Already earlier on in chapter 1, we talk about how man wasn't alone, right? So we are told from a metaphysical perspective that man and woman were an androgynous creature, one creature. Some say they were back to back to each other or side to side, but the rabbis even say that like the biological functions of reproduction and all the desires associated with that were already in place, but still he felt alone. And even the word levad, which means alone, comes from the Hebrew, the root of lavud, which means actually connected. And it's the sad irony, which is humans are the only creature created that is capable of like abstractly knowing everything outside himself, but can't know one thing, which is himself. Right. And we say that it's why, in a certain sense, he needs to be separated from his wife. Right. And generally we say tsela in Hebrew, which in translation means rib, because in Hebrew, a tsela means a rib. However, the proper translation, tsela, when you're looking about it in the context of the tabernacle, means the side of the tabernacle. There's different tslaot, there are different sides of this structure. So here it doesn't mean that it was a piece of rib that was taken out like some sort of Grey's Anatomy situation. Rather, this was a separation of one side from another. I guess if they're back to back, they can't see each other. And this is why there's another verse that talks about that the wife needs to be ezer kenegdo, a help against him. And the attitude is a wife allows you to see yourself in a certain light and allows you to elevate yourself as well. And that's why, even though she seems to be not combative, but like she is in front of you in a certain sense versus you, but it's really only to assist you in your growth. A way to let's say conceptualize this in our modern day life is I'm at a party with friends and I'm being silly and my wife comes and calls me out, right? And knows how to call me out in the proper way, because she's calling me out for being silly, but at the same way she's elevating me and raising me because she wants the best for me. She sees the potential in me that I can't necessarily see, but she knows me well enough to see me as I am, right? So that's sort of the relationship we want to be cultivating. What else? This is last. Okay, bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. We should also discuss that a little. And again, sort of at a high level, we have the concept man or Adam is really including both male and female, and they're symbolized by these two concepts: a bone being male and the flesh being female. And the reason of this is, well, we know that there is that humans have wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. So generally speaking, men excel at knowledge, which here is used as the bone, which is the structure. And women are the flesh, which is more sensitive and more emotional. And here there's, again, the idea is that they both complete each other in that sense, right? Without one another, like men lack emotion and women lack structure. But when they're combined together, obviously, then they are both emotionally attuned and structurally solid at that point. Obviously, these are general terms. Maybe it's not the most PC, but I believe you understand where I'm coming from.
I usually play with that in the XY genetics thing because it's still like, well, that makes sense. If you took a side out of an X and a Y, you took one of them and you put them back together, there's still that sense of cohesion because X isn't out of place. It should be. So as, you know, the woman being in that kind of relationship with man should only add back into the relationship what should be there to begin with.
So, right. So there's two layers of doing that adding on, right? Because initially when we're made, we are made more similar to God, right? God's not female or male. We're this united creature. There's a separation. However, just like God wants us to cleave to him and get closer to him, there's a sense of you're separated, but reunite to become one, but find each other. And through finding each other, you'll also find me. There's a more intuitive interpretation, which would be man and women together create new flesh, which is a child, right? So this is how the two could go back into the one again. And obviously we saw that in the creation of a child, there are three partners, mother, father, and God. So here again, we could see that allows us to return back to our original form in a certain sense, both having components of his mother and have components of his father as well. All right. Let's get into it with procreation. When the Holy One, blessed be he, created human beings, male and female, it was said, and God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. And so, too, after the flood, he blessed Noah and his family, as is written, and God blessed Noah and his sons. And he said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Because it is the will of God that the human species should increase in number in order to advance civilization. As the prophet said, he did not create the world to be a wasteland, but formed it for habitation. We already mentioned that verse in the past with regards to the technological advancements that we also want to be doing in the world. And that's also what God is demanding from us. So that's another level of inhabiting the world, but obviously also to procreate and have kids. And here, like we said, that this is against celibacy. So you could see this stressed twice, once to Adam and Eve, again to Noah. You should know the difference over there. Originally, we talk about subduing the animals. God also sees before Noah, that didn't really work out so well, that we were fully in control of the animals. Rather, on the second time around, when he asks the animals to come into the ark, God is trying to create some sort of balance where we are more respectful and more appreciative of the animals, not necessarily trying to subdue them, but more sort of work in a partnership with them in a certain sense. And that is, again, God is sort of seeing that allowing humans to just be in control doesn't necessarily work. And they require like a little more communication, a little more cooperation with Earth and Mother Nature. Okay. Getting into the real. Antonio, do you want to take us through 1, 2, and 3, starting with 1?
Love between a man and his wife is one of the highest expressions of both human and divine morality. The essence of the principle to love your fellow as yourself manifests in a married couple. The most desirable way for facilitating the marriage bond is through a public ceremony, such as by traditional betrothal and sanctification.
Under chuppah canopy, this bond becomes obligatory and is validated absolutely after consummation of the marriage. Okay, so as far as number 1, right, this seems very obvious. However, this should be 196 is in Malachi. Yes, Malachi, but Malachi. But in that sense, in that scene, God gets involved as well. God is also very disappointed that we're not doing so. And in a certain sense, we're being told God himself wants this for us, right? This is very important, that God really believes that this is the highest expression, and this is how is to live properly. Number 2, the essence, like you mentioned over here, of love your fellow as yourself, or we said like the flip, that's like Rabbi Akiva, or the flip side of this, of Rabbi Hillel that we spoke about last week, which is about not doing what you want not done to you to others, right? As far as being hateful, which is sometimes easier to understand. Understanding what someone loves is a little harder than understanding what people don't want. So here too, we're being told that we want to fight for it, fight for your marriage. Right? Try as best as you can to make it work. Sandy, of course, I'm being as sensitive as I can with,
That's fine.
It's something that we really work for, that we really want.
I took 37 years of trying. I did.
I understand. And sometimes it doesn't work. And it doesn't mean it's not successful, right? We have your beautiful sons, right? And that is amazing. And just for that, it was worth it, right? We just said, like earlier, that would have been enough. So it would have been enough. And I bless every day that God allowed such an amazing gift to be in your family, in life. And they are very fortunate to have such a loving and caring a mother as well. Another interpretation of section 2 is not to let your wife see you in an unfavorable light, or vice versa, right? So don't create the conditions where that could be happening, right? So it's whether or not, like, not saying the things she doesn't like, or not doing things that are really going to disturb her. There is a discussion with regards to during sexual relations, that this should be happening in a dark setting. And the reason is, you want to make sure that your wife feels comfortable, that you feel comfortable, that she won't be thinking that he's going to see how my body looks, or I don't know, the husband didn't shave well enough. We want to make sure that that's not what we're thinking about. We want to make sure we're thinking about what's happening on the interior. Yes, of course, the physical matters, and of course, attraction matters. The attitude is, we don't need to be stressing that, right? That doesn't, like, when we're together, we don't have to be shining lights to make sure that we could see our imperfections. Rather, recognize how together we could be perfect together, and we complete each other. With regards to number 3, so the canopy is the concept of having heaven above us, right? It's a concept of being in the structure, which is both taking spiritual desires and physical desires, like sexual desires, and having them converge into one under one place, specifically under heaven. And this is a sense where we get to take a quote unquote evil inclination and orient it towards the good, right? So I'm not going to willy-nilly going to be sleeping around. Rather, I'm taking that desire I have, I'm putting it inside a structure under heaven with my wife in front of all these people. I'm making a commitment. And this is also, we live in a world today where as they say in Hollywood, like, you have your first wife, and then you have your second wife. And then, like, the concept isn't, like, as Sandy said, I fought for it for 37 years. That is what it needs. It needs to be worth fighting for. You want to commit to it. You want to know that I'm not, like, and we use these terms, obviously, like, to death do us part, or in sickness and his health. But those are beautiful concepts that should be taken very seriously. Right. And that's when it matters, right? When the person is sick, when the individual is having the hard time. That's when you need to be meeting them. This is something I discuss with my wife all the time, which is, a marriage is not 50-50. A marriage is the 90-10. The marriage is, sometimes all I could give you right now is 10, and I need you to give me that other 90. And that means sometimes all you could give me is 10, and I'm going to give you my other 90. But it's not about 50-50. It's about completing each other and seeing where each other need each other. Now, it's not going to be cool if for the next 2 years, all you could give is 10. Right. So, like, that's less awesome, but you want to really be participating and seeing the other. In Judaism, so first of all, just to be clear, this is being said that Noahides are not commanded to get married in the ceremony, but it's desirable, right? It creates a structure, it creates a sense of commitment, and it's instead of going to Vegas to a priest, there's a sense of, having this officiated properly. We're being told over here, obviously, that at the end, after the consummation of marriage, that's when it's actually considered, the bond is obligatory. I want to see if that's true also to Noahides, 199. The Mishnah Torah Chad, where it's inferred that Noahides are permitted but not obligated to observe Irusin. Okay, so this is like an engagement, and a chuppah, wedding canopy practices associated with marriage. So it used to be that people would get engaged for a year, and then they would get married. Now that's not really the case so much, but it's saying over here that Noahides could take part of this, could use this method for their practices and their communities as well. In Judaism, there's famously the scene where we step on the cup and break the cup, and everyone yells Mazel Tov. In reality, and today many rabbis actually pause and tell the crowd, please do not yell Mazel Tov when we break the cup. And so now during the blessing, what they did is in the middle of the blessing of, if I forget you, Jerusalem, I'll forget my right hand, my tongue will stick to the top of my throat. In the middle of that blessing, they stop. He breaks the cup. They continue. And it's happening during the blessing, so people don't get confused. But we break the cup to remind ourselves that even in this amazing union, Jerusalem is still not built. The Messiah is still not here. So while we, of course, are in this joyous moment, it is never complete because Jerusalem is not complete. So we are not complete. And this is also true with regards to building new homes. When I build any one of my clients a new home, there is a portion of the house that you leave unplastered. And the reason is this is remembrance of the destruction of the temple, and it's left in the house. And the idea is, like, it doesn't matter if it's the most beautiful house and I just designed it beautifully. I want an area to remind me that it is still not complete. And we remind ourselves about this daily with different prayers. Personally, I have a little hard time with it because, like, I am physically building your house in Jerusalem in 2024. So there's a sense of, like, how are we still talking about the destruction if I'm now physically rebuilding? But of course, there's a sense yet that we're still not complete. So
can I make a comment? Even up to and including that point, through all of this, and the 90-10 really got me thinking as well, is when you talk about the traditions of where what was man originally created back to back, and when separated, put front to front. And we were talking earlier about wrestling with God in my earlier question. And I was thinking, there's a difference in the support. There's a difference in the relationship. There's a difference in what you can give to each other back to back and what you can give to each other. I always picture that sort of like wrestling stance of, like you lean into each other when you're face to face. But if God made man as part of himself, and from the beginning to the end, we are still in some ways that creation, Adam, in two separate pieces now that are meant to be one. There's still that component of, and our unity in God until everything is complete. So even in the best moments, even in the joy, there's still that echo of waiting for completion.
Beautifully said, and definitely that definitely resonates and with what we were saying over here. So thank you for sharing that. Go ahead.
If I may ask, so Hezi, so we're talking about the laws of, like, sexual morality for Noahides, but I am curious, do any rabbinic laws apply? So do any Darabanans apply to non-Jews?
What do you mean? Again, a Darabanan, it depends. Sorry, go ahead.
Was, like, for example, there's Rabbeinu Gershom's famous takana against polygamy. So if a non-Jew lives in Ashkenaz country, would that apply to him?
So in theory, no. Then there's a different question, which is, like, what's the law in that country, right? Because we spoke about last week about dina de malchuta dina, right? The law of the land, assuming it's moral and things like that, is what applies. So you could say that, like, yes, it's halachically permissible, but considered illegal in your country. So that would be a problem. It's also, just in general, a recipe for disaster. Just with regards to, like, human nature. So this is not something that is really recommended. So, it might even be in one of the footnotes over here. We'll go back and see it, but I think that would be, again, not prohibited, but not advised.
So there are no rabbinic enactments on non-Jews?
No, there's the 7, as we spoke about. There's what we derive from the 7. And then there's what we speak about here, which is proper conduct or what's advisable or recommended for Noahides. But there's no rabbinic obligation on the Noahides, because the rabbinic obligations is already a lower level, right? A Rabbanan it's not a Doraita, it's not from the Torah, and their 7 laws derive from the Torah. They never derive from secondary levels of Rabbanan. For Jews specifically, we don't differentiate between those things because of many of the things that the rabbis say. In some cases, we see them as far as we're concerned, they're coming from the Torah. But on the ground, I will look at if I have a doubt, if there's something that is questionable, and it's also a decree by the rabbis, that's a double doubt, which is called a sfeik sfeika. And if there's a sfeik sfeika, you could be more lenient, because now I have two levels of separation over here from the one and true Torah. So so they're never going to be obligatory, but they definitely will be recommended.
Okay. Yeah, I understand.
Okay, cool beans. And because you asked so beautifully, you're going to read 4 and 5.
Okay. 4. A man and woman who have love between them as well as trust and mutual respect are found favorable and beloved by the eye of the Creator. 5. It is especially appropriate to invest time in nurturing the love between husband and wife in the first year of marriage.
Okay, so number 4. Well, let me take a step back. Dating, right? We don't really talk about dating over here. So just in general, unlike the modern world we live in today, it's not about the physical. It's not about just having a good time all the time. Well, yes, of course, it's important. And when you go on a date, you don't want it to be an interview. You want to make sure that there's attraction over there and I'm interested. But do we have common goals? Are we oriented the same way? Those are the things that really matter. And we need to know if we want this, we share the same vision of the future. I could find myself like with a woman who has my child, but now I'm in it, but we don't share so many things. And now what is this marriage going to look like? So generally speaking, and it varies in Judaism, in Jewish communities. So I was with clients today, there's resumes for the daughters and the sons, and there's matchmakers that meet up and they compare resumes. So that's like one level. There's some that get, it's arranged marriages. That's like another extreme. I would say, sorry?
Other than love to whore, I don't know of any Orthodox Jews who do like stuff like arranged marriages.
All the time in many, many places, for sure. But what I mean, there's no force. This is who you're going to marry. But I spoke to Gittel, and Gittel spoke to Chaim, and we think you guys should both meet, and this person would be great for you. Now there's a problem there, because in many cases, said boy and said girl have never spoken to the other sex, right? So there's also an issue which is like, do they even know how to interact? And like, at the very least, do you know that you need to flirt with her? Like, now is when you flirt with her. Or guess what, buddy? The date needs to end at some point, and she's not actually going to finish her meal right now. She's not being rude. She doesn't want to eat anymore. And don't wait there for hours, assuming like when she finishes, then the date was going to be over. But you need to have some sort of understanding of what's going on. And obviously parents should assist their friends if they see they have a blind spot to that. But assuming the dating period was successful, just to put some skin in the game, I dated heavily, and I was definitely known as like an intense dater, because like while I would date and have fun and crack jokes, I would very quickly speak about children, marriage, commitment, and in no way was I thinking I want to have a child right now. But if it freaks you out to speak about children, then we're obviously not meant for each other, because like that's definitely down the line. So like we could be going into the club in a minute. That's totally fine. But at the same time, I also want to know that like, just like I dance hard, I also want to father hard. And if that's to talk about, then we're not in the same world right now. Right. So we want to have just be clear. I'm not talking about children while dancing, right? There's a time and place, but the idea is that people should be serious about what they want, and be clear about it. Either way, going back to number 4. So, one very important thing about number 4 is respect, mutual respect. You have to respect your wife and respect your husband. 0 tolerance for lies and deception, corrosive for a relationship, corrosive for society. But this is, obviously a very, very important component of love, is to make sure that your nest is a safe place, like where there's a trust going there. And it's very, very important to cultivate that. There's also like a play of words. If you can imagine, and I'm writing this into the comments so we could see it. There's Ish, There's Isha. Okay. So this is Ish. Well, okay, can't have a lot of time. Ish, Isha. Now let's remove the letters are very similar. Aleph, Yod, Shin, Aleph, Yod, Shin, Hey. Let's remove God from the equation, right? And how do we write God's name? With the double Yud or with the letter Hey. Let's remove those, and all we have is fire, right? So if we remove God from the relationship, you're left with just devastation, something that completely overwhelms itself and burns itself. That's why the point of the glue, the point of orientation, what you guys are working around besides your relationship is recognizing obviously that God is there as well, that the sacred is there as well. So again, this is not like a science. This is just a little cute play of words. Number 5. It is custom that does he mention this in the footnotes? Let's see, 2021. No, he doesn't talk about it over there. Okay, so this first year in marriage is called in Hebrew Shana Rishona, the first year. And there's many people in Israel that have, like my clients today, their daughter is married over here and she's experiencing her first year. So that looks like for, let's say, a lot of people abroad, their daughter and their son get married. They send them to Israel for the year. The son is learning and the wife is just, usually at home or working. And the attitude is zero expectations, just be with each other. Just grow, learn, love, date, do. In some cases, it depends on your rabbi and your community, but they say, you don't have to have a child for the first year because we really want to make sure that first year, the foundation, when you work on yourself, when you develop yourself, and it's a very important time to create like a schedule, in so to speak. I mean, you want it to be romantic, but you need to make sure that the relationship is maintained. You don't want to, heaven forbid, get stale. Jordan Peterson talks about this. I can't remember his exact equation, but it's something like 90 minutes a week of like communication talk about like the schedule, what do we be doing? And 2 days a week, there should be a date, right? So that's obviously coming not through Torah, but that's just coming through psychology. But the concept is that you need to make sure that there's lines of communication. You need to make sure that the relationship is being nurtured constantly. While the focus is on that first year, right? Your foundational year, obviously you should continue your life and all the time be working on your marriage and trying to get closer. But there's something beautiful about focusing that before you go into the real world, make sure that you guys are going in as a full unit and it could be a year, it could be 2 years, spend time cultivating that relationship honestly. And it doesn't really help that you dated for 4 years. See what that's like as a marriage. See what that's like as a marriage unit as well. Okay. Unfortunately, if things don't work out well, if heaven forbid the marriage bonds do not turn out well, it can be severed by the decision of one of the couples to separate. It is desirable to arrange a separation of the man and the woman officially in front of representatives of the community. Their decision to separate will be inscribed upon a mutually agreed document, and the husband will declare in the presence of witnesses, "You are hereby divorced from me and are permitted to any man." Or the woman will declare, "I am hereby no longer under your authority and I'm permitted to any man." I know authority can be like a heavy word, right? Don't take it too seriously. It's, patriarchy, men, we're all good and we love women. Yes, go ahead, Kirk.
So an interesting thing here is that it seems like there would be no problem of an aguna in Noahide marriages because they just have to separate like voluntarily. Whereas like, in Jewish marriages, even if they have been apart for a while and the woman has been apart, they have to get a divorce, and that's where you get the agana problem.
Okay, so Kirk is bringing up a very interesting point over here. I'll dive into that in a moment. First off,
when you do, there are some not specifically, not Noahide communities, but there are some within the Christian communities or perhaps other religious communities for whom that is a similar issue based on perception of authority, the structures, and who is allowed to do what. So it's not exactly unrelated. It's just not related in the same way. Okay.
So first of all, just to clarify, in Judaism, this is not a sin, right? You have people that they can't get divorced. In Christianity, it's not a sin. At some point, the relationship doesn't work, and people don't have to be trapped forever, right? They'll both grow, they'll both continue. So it's important. While it's, of course, it's a sad solution, it is a solution nonetheless. And in some cases, it's actually a joyous time, right? Yes, there was a crack in the temple, so to speak, right? And God is sad about this, but he wants you to be free, find someone else, procreate with him, get married with him, build that true bond. But it's not a sin. In Judaism, right? First off, before you get first off, there's an issue. This doesn't exist in the States, but because we have a mixture of church and state, right? So if one wants to get divorced in Israel, there is an authority race, right? The woman will usually run to the court system first because the courts are usually going to be more favorable with the women. Not always, but sometimes. The man will usually run to the rabbinate, who are usually going to be more favorable with him. Whoever makes the claim first, that's where the rest of the divorce is going to be played out. Okay. The problem with this is both of them are thinking about them and not thinking about the child at that moment. And the focus should always be about the children at that moment. How we make sure they stay safe, they stay protected. Okay. Thank you for that little song, Kirk. Now, another thing to take into consideration is the rabbis are usually going to ask for a period of shalom bayit, peace in the home. Can you still try to make this work?
There's always supposed to be shalom bayit.
I understand. Now, what we read right now is saying if it doesn't work for both of them, they could both bust a move, right? In Judaism, it doesn't happen right away. First, the rabbis will say, first try to make it work, right? So there's less demands over here from the Noahide, right? We're saying like, you don't have to have the ceremony. It makes sense. You don't have to make sure you're doing this in front of the community. It makes sense to do it. It makes sense to do it again because everyone knows what the deal is. There's not going to be confusion. There's not going to be jealousy. You're not going to have hearsay and gossip. So there's many reasons why you want to do that. You also want to, just like you made the commitment that it worked, you want to show that it's okay that it didn't work. And I'm still very much respecting this woman, and I'm doing it because I respect her. And I wanted to make it clear that I don't have any claim anymore, and she has no longer claim on me as well. Now, two other points of distinction. For Jews, it gets a little wonky with the fact that if the guy doesn't want to give or approve of this divorce, he could withhold the divorce in many cases. This is a very big issue in Judaism. It's a concept called aguna, because if he doesn't give her the divorce papers, she is still considered married, which means she cannot marry anyone else. And you have in Israel women that for 17 years they're stuck. Now,
I mean, it also exists in men too, but just less common.
Yes, a lot less common that you're going to have a man in that kind of situation. Now, there are different lawyer groups and different groups of like some of them are called Dead End, like that's the name of their organization, and they help assist these kind of women. A long time ago, 1,000 years ago, roughly, Maimonides said that if the guy doesn't want to give the divorce papers, you beat him until he says, I want to. Okay? And people ask Maimonides, whoa. What are you talking about? I beat him until he says he wants to. That would be a forced get. And we know a forced get doesn't apply. So in a crazy statement, Maimonides says, really, that's what his soul wanted. He just doesn't know it. So we just beat him till he recognized that that's really what his soul wanted. Right? So like that obviously is pretty crazy. There were groups up until a few years ago, even in the States, where people would hire... Yeah, and they would like rough you up, right? Break your legs, things like that. There's a scene in The Sopranos as well. They hire Tony Soprano to do this. Obviously illegal. You can't do that anymore today. And that is, we don't have that jurisdiction anymore. Clearly, if we had the Sanhedrin and the high courts, we would have, let's say, more teeth. I mean, another thing to note that Israel has the power. This would be like bananas if you thought about this in the States. But Israel, if the guy won't give the divorce papers, there are things that the country could do. One of them is, for example, we take your passport away and you can't leave the country. It would be crazy in the States to say we are now we're not letting you travel because according to your religion, you're still considered married, right? That would be bananas. Israel has the power to do so. And that's why courts around the world, rabbinical courts around the world, many times need Israel for that kind of jurisdiction, where they'll say, like, we need now the courts in Israel to say that if he comes in, you're going to arrest him, or if he like, so that's why they get involved. So the rabbinate has actually some legal teeth, which is again powered through Torah in a certain sense, which is very, very interesting. Now, Noahides wouldn't have that problem, right? The husband's being an asshole. You just got to bounce and you got to boogie. And then you have to realize you're no longer married to that person because you're not under that jurisdiction. I wrote this down to myself to clarify this, to confirm this, but I believe this is the case. One other distinction I'll note, which is with regards to the priest, the Kohen. The Kohen cannot marry a divorcee, right? So if Kohen gets divorced, he could only marry if a Kohen divorces, right? His wife, for example, won't be able to marry some other Kohen. There is a famous case of a Supreme Court justice in Israel who was a Kohen, not secular. Secular. He had to leave the country and get married in Cyprus and then come back. Now, get married, and this is also true in Israel, even in the 80s. Israel also recognized gay marriage. As long as you have a legitimate certificate, Israel will recognize it at the marriage. So if you came and you got married in a civil marriage in Cyprus, Israel will recognize that marriage and all the rights. But in Israel proper, you cannot get married not through the law of Moses, which is another point of tension. Personally, I think they should be separated because I believe most people in Israel want to get married through the religious structure, just don't want to feel like they're forced to do so.
I don't think they should be separated. It's God's law. The government has a right to enforce it, but
the government has. So first, if you listen, I said, I want that outcome, and I believe that will be the outcome. The question is, should you be enforcing that? And why it gets problematic is someone like my brother who married his wife. His wife was Russian. The rabbinate starts digging and digging and digging. That letter doesn't help me, right? So here's a letter from my grandfather. He's a rabbi in America. I don't recognize that congregation. Okay, here's a letter from this well-respected rabbi. Yeah, I don't like that rabbi. I want more letters. I want the official marriage certificate. But they were in the gulag and that was burnt, right? So we need people that are going to be more sensitive. I'm not asking for rabbis to approve things willy-nilly without doing due diligence, but there's a way of how that needs to be done in a more loving and understanding way.
Yeah, I do think, especially with the conversion issue, there is an issue with the ultra Haredi mindset in the chief rabbinate, if that makes sense.
That does make sense, and hopefully that will change one day, please God. All right. Everyone, as far as timing, doing well? Can we continue going through? Okay, good.
Yeah. So you want me to read this?
Sorry? Yeah, sure. Take on 1, 2, 3.
Proper conduct. A man must refrain from spending time alone with someone else's wife in a closed room or other area into which people are not likely to enter. So, some concept of Yehud. Wearing modest attire that preserves a person's honor, particularly where women are concerned, and especially married women, is an elevated character act. Therefore, it is also appropriate to refrain from wearing clothes classically associated with the opposite sex. So, lo yilbash, I believe, is a term. It is appropriate that the marriage document will include an official commitment on the part of the husband to look after the welfare and comfort of his wife. So, I guess this is like a prenuptial agreement, or
sort of correct, exactly. Again, be sensitive with the. Don't be too. Nitpicky on the terminology they're exactly using over here, but let's go. Okay, so number 1, in Judaism, it's any woman, right? You can't be alone with any woman. The Talmud gives an example of at what time can we suspect? How long if a man goes into a room with another woman, what is the time we should suspect that no good is going to come of this? And they say the amount of time it takes you to walk around a tree. Right. So a very short amount of time is we have very little faith in men, generally speaking.
But Yehud,
I'm sorry?
It seems like Yehud doesn't really apply to non-Jews unless it's someone that's married.
In this case, it's talking about someone that's married, right? Now, so in our practice today, that means you leave the door a little open. You make sure other people are in the house. And again, the door doesn't have to be open, but you know that you're being filmed. At the same time, the door needs to be open, but there's a big glass that's open so people could see outside. So these would be all ways to like avoid that situation, avoid like these intimate situations. Obviously with Me Too, it also makes sense, right? Protect yourself from these kind of claims, right? You never want to hear, like, it's much easier for a Jewish observant person or a Noahide observant person. If they practice this, they're going to be in a lot less trouble or scenarios where someone could say, he touched me, he did this, he did that. We obviously all know how scenarios, marriages get destroyed. You are working with someone very late at night. So this is how humans interact. So we're being told over here to steer clear of spending time alone with someone's woman. Number two,
but
yes.
The distinction I was making is that it's stricter for Jews because it is for Jews it's any woman, even if they're not married, and for non-Jews it's more lenient because it's like the only requirement is only against the married woman. Basically.
Correct. That doesn't mean that it's not recommended for Noahides to behave in the same fashion. And that means we could see in a certain sense, right? Like in movies today, the boyfriend from school comes to see the girl and he goes upstairs and the mom says like, make sure you're leaving that door open. I don't want any fooling around going on there. So that would be true, but that's also true as we become adults. Even when we're married, we want to make sure we're avoiding those dangerous situations. Wearing modest attire that preserves a person's honor, right? Or particularly a woman. So just because, again, how women and men interact, women don't really care that much if a guy's walking in a bathing suit. Men go gaga if they see a woman in a bathing suit.
That's a bit of a stereotype.
I understand it's a bit of a stereotype. But you have to realize with studies that's shown, the list of the top 10 things for men and women, number 1 or number 2 for men is sex. Number 8 or 7 is sex for women. Right? That's just not the priority. It doesn't mean that they don't want it. It doesn't mean that they don't like it. It doesn't mean that they don't need it. It's just not what makes their head spin. And for men, it just does. We have a very, very hard time. And that's just how we're made, right? I see women as potential to sire more children. And I want to do that because going all the way back to what God commanded, be fruitful and multiply. We have to channel that. We have to bring in the spirit. And that's what we spoke about in the canopy. I'm taking my evil inclination with the sacred and orienting it properly, right? I'm confining it. So the Torah is very pro-sex, expression of sex with your wife as well, but it's with your wife in closed doors, when it's dark, when the focus isn't just the physical, or the focus is the physical should be elevated through the sacred and done properly. So as far as the clothing we're talking about over here, generally speaking, men should not wear women's clothing. So obviously cross-dressing or, trans, that's another side issue they would have to be dealing with. And women shouldn't be wearing men's clothing. In today's world where we live in, we have to recognize a few things. One, there are some rabbis that say that, like Aladdin pants or more relaxed pants are less of an issue for men to wear, for women to wear. Clearly you're never going to be able to have a workaround with those new like workout pants that girls wear, or those like, so like that's obviously you're never going to get an okay for that. And that's also, we should also emphasize that there's a difference about like, you could be attractive without being attracting. Okay. As in, yes, make your hair look nice, put on makeup. That's fine. But how much attention are you demanding for yourself? And you may have a woman that is wearing a pair of skinny jeans and just like a t-shirt, but the way she behaves is very modest. And also inside she's modest. So she's not getting those eyes. And there could be a woman that is not wearing pants and wearing like a long sleeve shirt, but it's super tight. And she's very vulgar and she talks about sex and she's being very, very immodest, right? So it's not like a dry and cold, like you could talk about sex, but as long as you're wearing a skirt, it's all fine. So there's a certain amount of flexibility over here, but the attitude is that what are you selling, right? Are you selling your body or are you selling what's inside ultimately? And we should refrain from these confusing identities that we try to take on for ourselves. And obviously this is also alluding to how, I identify as a ribbon, I identify as a girl, I identify as always being right. All the way that people want to identify today is very problematic. And we should recognize these divisions while of course being very sensitive to anyone dealing with any mental issues or dealing with trauma issues. And we of course could be loving and understanding and caring. And that's a separate conversation with regards to what we should do from a policy perspective. But from a religious perspective, this is not going to work. We obviously realize sex sells. This is what the whole world is trying to do. We are not buying into that. We believe someone should be sexy for her husband, for his wife. And that's the world it happens to. We should, of course, also explain this to our children as well, and lead by example, but also explain to them already as they start getting older what they should be expecting from the opposite sex. And again, we shouldn't be trying to have other people be attracted to us. I understand that's counterintuitive from the secular Hollywood world we live in today. And number 3, it is an appropriate marriage document, like we just said, having this semi prenup over here. So again, if someone's bothered by the fact that the husband is there to look over their welfare, feel free to articulate it in a way that it talks about a mutual commitment to one another. It could be that in this case, the woman is the breadwinner, so it's the woman, right? So this is just talking about what's generally the case, but the idea is that people should be committed to each other and feel confident inside the relationship. Okay. 4, a person should not gaze at immodest sights. A man, 5, should not desire another man's wife. Okay, so we'll just focus for some 2. So first, a person should not gaze at immodest sights. Here too, in theory, you could say like Chezi, but it's not saying it's forbidden. So can I watch porn? So if you push me to the wall, I would say it's not forbidden for Noahides to do that. And the only reason I'm saying that is there's if my child is caught watching porn, which unfortunately they say today, kids already at the age of 3rd grade are introduced to this. My reaction is not going to be like, get this evil thing out of my house, right? We obviously understand these are natural behaviors, how people interact, how people explore themselves. So one wants to do so being sensitive. Having said that, it is completely forbidden for Jews to be participating in that. For Noahides, not so. But of course, recommended is saying not to do so. Here too, the attitude would be, you have a son and you find out that that's what he's doing. You want to explain to him these things. You want to have the conversation with him, but you shouldn't go in there being like, it's as if he murdered, or it's as if he did, he is going over a commandment from God. Again, that's not a recommendation to go sign up to, I don't know what that's, Pornhub, that site. So here too, we want to be averting our eyes, right? That doesn't mean I can't notice the symmetry in someone. We even know about a rabbi in the Talmud that made a blessing about a beautiful woman that, and it said like that God created such beauty in this world, right? We spoke about this in an earlier chapter. Having said that, we're saying that's not A, that's a rabbi, B, that's not a practice that people should be taking on for themselves. Like what? I'm looking at the Playboy Mansion. I'm just there to bless everyone, right? So like, yeah, don't be hanging out there. People will understand what you're doing over there. We don't want to be giving off the wrong signals either, right? So,
Can I make a quick comment?
Of course.
I think in some respects, it will sound strange, but this relates to the first 3 points in a lot of ways. It goes back to it goes back to attraction. It goes back to the sorting out your priorities, and it goes back to all those other things you mentioned, and even getting what is the structure under which you're married. And when we look at immodest sights, even though it's very hard not to in the modern age, because you walk into any store and you have no control over what you see, there is something akin to your willingness to create the document that you described, where you lay things out, what's important to me. And I don't want to belittle pornography for a sense, because it's a huge issue in a number of relationships because of what I'm hopefully pointing at in terms of the first 3 points. But it would be the same as if it could even be as same as if my husband comes home and he's constantly providing all the best things to me. But at the same time, the only thing I talk about and the only thing that I raise up in terms of my estimation and the only thing that I stare at and allude to is pictures in a magazine of something I don't have yet and would rather have, or the neighbor's best, but sure, I love the dining room table you got me, but do you know what so-and-so, there's an element
coveting your neighbor's wife, right? And coveting is more than just the wife itself, but coveting the grass is greener, the other world, as we say, as the sages say, Ezehu Ashir Hasamach Bechelko. Who is the one that's rich? One who's happy with his lot. And recognizing, and back to our first conversation, that this is enough.
Yes, thank you. That's much more succinct than I said it.
But thank you for contributing. Okay. With regards to 5, a man should not desire another woman's wife. So first of all, hell no. Obviously, this completely ruins and devastates communities. Just to play out that interaction. So we're not saying right now when I walk outside my house and I see my female neighbor and she's like, hey, Chazi, I just put my head to the ground and walk away and don't look at her. You could say hi. You could be polite. You can talk. She comes by to borrow some sugar. She needs can you help my son with this? I know you're good with that. Those are all healthy, fine, and desirable interactions. We want to be very friendly. However, I'll explain it this way. We have many Shabbat meals and we host a lot. I have no problem having a discussion.
We lost him.
I know. He'll come back.
Lost me?
Yes, we have. Well, your picture is frozen and the sound stopped for a minute.
I was saying
back to the Shabbat meals.
Right, I'm having a Shabbat meal and we have 2 different couples over. And we're talking and we're cracking jokes and we're laughing and I'm even friendly with the wife, right? We have an inside joke and it's all very nice within this context. I just spoke to her now for 2 hours at my Shabbat table around all these people. There's no version of me talking to her now for 2 hours during the week, just like on the street. That would never happen. That would be inappropriate. Why are you spending so much time talking to this person? You're joking around, laughing. Now, there's a place for that, right? It's happening with the family together in a safe space, someone seeing me. There's no worry that this relationship could evolve into something else. So again, it's not even such a delicate balance. It's recognizing there's a time and place. Definitely you want to be polite. There could even be a relationship with other people, but you have to really, really set the boundaries on those type of relationships. There's no such thing as it would not be recommended to our kids come home from school at the same time. So until your husband comes home, I just hang out at your house for those hours. What are you talking about? What do you mean? We're just talking. We're just hanging out. Okay, but that was this week. In 3 weeks, you guys are going to notice that you guys have things in common. In 5 weeks, you're going to notice that you don't like when your husband does X and this other person doesn't do it. And next thing you know, you guys have this very problematic relationship over there. So definitely not avoided and definitely not recommended, and you should avoid, not avoided. Okay. Number 6. Noahide who want to 6, right? Yeah. Noahide who want to observe laws of purity concerning a woman's monthly cycle in the manner of Jews are permitted to do so. Okay.
But not obligated.
Correct. Not obligated. There's a menstrual cycle. According to the Torah, you're really talking about around 7 days. Today, because of doubting and our loss of tradition of exactly counting the days, it comes up to be roughly 2 weeks. Okay. And this is no sex, no physical contact whatsoever. Again, there are degrees to this. There are some that separate the beds. And if your wife wants the salt, you won't directly give it to her. You will first you will pick it up, move it to an area next to her on the table, and then she will pick it up. Okay. And some will go and say don't sit on the bed on a surface that she'll feel the fact that you sat on the bed. So if you can imagine a couch, there are couches that just have one long pillow, and there's couches that have 3 individual pillows. Right. So one would on the long pillow would be don't sit in the same seat with your wife. Now, that's kind of extreme. And the attitude is you don't want to awaken that arousal, so to speak, if you guys are in that moment. Many today simply don't have sex, but that doesn't mean they don't pass each other's assault or make things awkward for other people, right? Like if I'm in front of like guests right now and my wife asks for something and I make like this whole weird movement and I move around her, everyone's going to be like, okay, I guess they're in that time of the month. And that's, again, like not very modest to be bringing people in to that world. Now, the idea for this is, first of all, after these 12 days, she goes to the ritual bath. And the attitude is like, this was a moment where life, well, that's a separate topic, get into exactly what we're doing in these purity laws. But the idea is to create this cycle of anticipation between a husband and wife, right? And this is part of, we sent that first year where we're working on our marriage. This is throughout most of our life until your wife reaches menopause. To be fair, while your wife reaches menopause and also while your wife is pregnant, during that whole period, there is no separation, right? So it's not really half your life. It's less than that if you think about it like long term, but it definitely is something that is very, very prevalent in your relationship. And the idea is during those 2 weeks is when you're thinking about the relationship, right? We want to avoid the mundane routine and keep a spark alive over there. So this is a very, I believe, a healthy practice, an empowering practice as well, showing a lot of self-control, showing, focusing on the fact that during those 2 weeks, we can still have a loving relationship that doesn't involve sex at all. And it only intensifies the physical relationship after those 2 weeks, where we get to return, in a certain sense, back to our Eden, back to the first time we touched, back to the first time we felt that relationship. And that could be a very beautiful, beautiful moment as well. So, like I said, Noahides could take this on. This would be an example where a Noahide could say, like, I'm going to take it on, but I'm going to take it on according to how it was biblically, 7 days. I'm not going to wait 2 weeks. And to each his own, ultimately, but a beautiful, while difficult practice.
I mean, I think it's a little bit arbitrary to take it on, but
What do you say?
I don't see much need to have this specific time based on a monthly cycle, but that's what Jews recommend to do, and I can't argue with God on that. But
well, why would you not think it's recommended? Do you think it's?
I mean, it's just for
saying,
not
like
I understand the idea of having some period of like separation where we can love each other and not base our relationship solely on primal urges, but like the specific menstrual cycle just seems a little bit arbitrary to me personally.
Well, I mean, you're talking about like the idea is that you're going to be with your wife at the time that she's the most fertile, right? As in, we want during those 2 weeks, not only for it to be pleasurable and amazing for the husband and wife, but also this is the prime time for creating life, which is what we said earlier. The reason for sex, yes, is for pleasure. Yes, there's all those ramifications and those levels of interpretation, but the focus is to be fruitful and multiply. And the prime time to be fruitful and multiply from a physical point of view is during those 2 weeks.
So, Kirk, what has he said about anticipation? Kind of goes back to what I said too about, the pornography and likening it to coveting, other people's property. Everything about this particular thing raises up the relationship between the couple to a place where they are in essence preparing themselves for more of the joy than the mundane. And so it might not be obligatory. It might not matter in the same sense as it would in the whole Jewish law system, but at the same time, it's not a terrible idea, because you want, when you are creating life, to be creating life with an attitude of expectation of good and expectation of what each of you brings to creating life. It's a really kind of beautiful thing in that sense. It's not just about the laws and the functions and the details. It's about the relationship and how you bring each other and God together in it.
Kirk, I would recommend that when the magical day will come and you will find your significant other, we could loop back around and discuss this again. Okay, purity laws, and sorry, go ahead, Kirk.
Do you want me to read this out, or?
Sure, go ahead.
So purity laws regarding illicit relations. A Noahide man is prohibited from having relations with any of the following and receives punishment from for doing so, presumably from a court system. 1. His mother. 2. Sorry, can you scroll up? 2. His father's wife, even if she is not his mother, after his father's death. 3. A married woman. That makes sense. A sister born to his mother, a male, and animals.
Okay, so I would say 6 should be a no-brainer. 4 is inappropriate. 3 is inappropriate, as we spoke earlier. 2 is, that is like there is something about that which is, again, in a certain sense, this is a kink for people who watch pornography, like mothers and things like that. There's like a whole, there's like an Oedipus.
Stepmom.
I don't know what the category is. I'm just saying I know that the science shows that like that is, there's like the whole Oedipus thing over there. They're fighting the father, so they're taking over the mother. So there's a sense over there which is like psychologically we understand why the man wants to do this. Obviously, this is something that you need to clamp down on, right? We're not here to like Zeus and Kronos. We're not there to kill our father necessarily and conquer our mother. And number 1, obviously, would be very obvious, right? Not aside from the fact that it's like a sterile circle and also dangerous genetically, we're moving for that. However, I do want to talk for a second about number 5. I should also mention that as far as number 5, women are also prohibited from doing so. However, it's not from the Torah. This is from the rabbis, and they quote that this shouldn't be done because this was the behavior done in Egypt, which is like
that would be biblically prohibited because of Hukat Hagoyim, like Darkei Hamari for Jews, but because non-Jews aren't obligated in Hukat Hagoyim, they would not technically be prohibited from lesbianism.
And that correct, Mundo. So that's why on this list for the Noahides, the woman's not there. Now, with regards to just the same sex, and just very shortly, this is unlike the animals who are prioritizing survival and are very egotistical or egocentric in that sense, right? If humans act this way, we are returning to our animalistic behavior. And there's something that's narcissistic about wanting to love something that's very similar to us. We're not then fulfilling the other one's wants and needs. And the Torah wants us to extend our love beyond the familial ties, right? My mother, my father, my sister, they're too much like me. A man is too much like me. We are looking there to see the other. We don't want to prefer the same thing, which is narcissistic. We're looking to find the other, see the other as well, and together create unity. So that's just, and the Torah talks about how we say, it says, Mishkav Zachar is a to'eva, which means it's an abomination. However, the word to'eva could be also split up to say to'e ata ba, which means you are making a mistake in this path. So it's not necessarily saying that it's an abomination, more that it's a sterile circle. It's an echo chamber. You can't procreate. You're not seeing the other. You're not going past the divide. You're just seeing yourself, and it is a egocentric relationship. I'm sure there's love out there. I'm not condemning gay people. I'm just explaining how the Torah sees that relationship.
I mean, with animals, they're very different from you, but it's prohibited still.
Yeah, correct, because it's an animal. It has no. It's not you. It's not a man at all. It has no soul in that sense.
So no connection, So it's not good. So it's good to have a connection with someone who's different.
Yes, it's desirable to have a connection with someone that's different. That's how we see the other.
Does the prohibition on bestiality with animals apply to fish?
Yeah. I'm sorry, Kirk. That loophole's not going to work for you this time.
I never said it was going to.
I know. We're going to see tomorrow in the news. Child arrested at supermarket for defiling fish. No, I'm joking, Kirk. Chas Shalom. That should never happen. I'm sorry if that was a rude joke. That was a good question, but no, thank you for clarifying. Fish are off the menu as well. Sorry, it's going to be hard for us to live that one down, Kirk. Just anticipate someone dropping that in one of the comments. Proper conduct. Okay, we'll go through these 5 quickly. Aside from the above prohibitions, it is appropriate to refrain from all illicit relations detailed in the Torah, in the book of Leviticus, which are the Canaanite abominations, as well as relations between one woman and another.
Is not recommended.
Right, so here we see 2012, was I right? Egypt, since it's the category deeds done in the land of Egypt. Amazing. Where you dwelled, you should not do. Okay, so we're saying for the lesbians out there, sorry. By the way, just as far as like why it's not at the same category of men, it's also the women could still bear a child in a certain sense, right? So like I'm saying, you could still be in that relationship, but like there's still something about the fact that they could bear a child. With the man, it's basically like this leads nowhere 100%. There's nothing that can be done over here. Okay, so that was number one. Number two, the sages of Israel praised the other nations, since even though some of them violated the prohibition of male-to-male relations, they refrained from institutionalizing this practice. Jacob talks to us about this a lot, how that was true that they would never let them get married, but now we're living in a world where this is happening, right? So like we shouldn't be praising the nations about this because there is complete moral decay in the world today. I should mention, with 1,000 differences, of course, but recently the Pope came out saying about like recognizing same-sex marriages in a specific way, but it shouldn't be done through a ceremony. It shouldn't be done in the church. We should make it clear that it's not a marriage. So there's something, I guess, interesting or potentially good in that move, which is the Pope is saying, I'm trying to understand the relationship. However, I'm not going to institutionalize it through the church, basically. So I'm not saying Jews should go around doing this right now, but the attitude here, the Pope is still holding his ground, so to speak, and saying this is not coming through the okay, I was going to say a pun that was inappropriate. Sorry. This is not something that we're going to give our stamp of approval for, so to speak.
It's not in the canon law.
It's not in the canon law. Number three, the court of Shem, the son of Noah, issued a ban on prostitution.
I thought Derabanans don't apply to non-Jews.
Okay, and is this an obligation right now? This is proper conduct. This is
it says that's a ban.
The court of Shem, the son of Noah, right? This is a ban he did. All right, let's look at 2014.
But I didn't know non-Jews could do like add to the Torah like that. Like non-Jews have, like Jews have rabbinic and harem.
Who's the non-Jew here?
So Shem.
Yeah, you're talking about like, pre. So also, you're also saying obviously that Abraham also can't add to the Torah anything, right?
Well, Abraham was a Jew.
Is he a Jew before Judah is born?
Before what?
Before Judah is born?
Oh, I mean,
he's a Noahide.
I didn't know that. I thought Abraham was the first Jew.
No, he is the first seedling of the Jewish concept, right? And like Jewish is much larger than Judah, but that concept, right, of like it has to do with like, did the forefathers keep all the Torah? It's difficult to think that they kept the commandment of Passover before the Israelites were in Egypt, right? So like they, the idea is that the forefathers were participating in the undergirding principles of the Jewish law, right? So they were living embodiments of these values, which later on become canonized and codified into a specific law. So just bear that in mind, that they're not Jewish, they are Hebrews.
Okay, that makes sense. There were no technical Jews before Matan Torah.
Vadai. They're already at that point. I mean, you have Judah, you have a group. Yes, correct. And there's some. I mean, they still probably have what their traditions from that the Levite class was teaching them at the time. So there's some structure already at that point that's a little more developed, right? They've been there for already a while. But yes, like I mean, as the Torah comes down, then we phase shift into a new realm. But that's a totally good point to ask and clarify. It is forbidden for a Jewish man to have relations with a Noahide woman, and it's forbidden for a Jewish woman to have relations with
no intermarriage.
Noahide man, correct. While we love you and see you and wholly respect you, that is a border that can't be crossed. Of course, in theory, Noahide men or Noahide women can convert. We don't generally convert for love. That's not the reason why we convert. You want to convert because you feel like your soul is demanding that you be Jewish. There is no demand like that. There's no obligation to do that. It's not even necessarily recommended to do that. Jews get a lot of hate in the world, as I'm sure you guys know. But yes, there isn't an intermarriage over there. One should not talk dirty about indecent subjects, right? So this is fairly clear. Right? We don't want to be talking about, like, again, you have to think about people sitting at the table.
Like Derek Eretz, right? The way of the land.
Well, you could say the way of the land today. I mean, if Dave Chappelle and Bill Burr are selling out the arenas, right? Is that the way of the land? To hear about comedians talk about like rapes and jokes and women body parts and things like that. So do I laugh if there's a joke that's funny? Yes. Is that what I should be spending my time on? Oh, dude, you have to see this new 7 special of Bill Burr. Like, okay, what are you doing with your life? What are you doing with your time? And, you know, it's very obvious. We don't allow our kids to talk that way. We shouldn't be talking that way either. And that doesn't mean we can't say someone's beautiful, like we said, like that rabbi said, right? He appreciated what that was, but there's a difference between doing that and talking dirty or about indecent subjects. By that, we finish chapter 6. Go ahead, Kirk, ask away.
The one final thing so it's more of a technical point about whether or not you can actually have an asur for a non-doing prostitution. Like, isn't the actual halakhic asur, or is it just not recommended? Because the court made the ban.
Having premarital sex is forbidden, right? This was specifically talking to the Noahide, right? We're telling the Noahide, you are already bringing yourself into the tent of the Jews, right? So you should recognize now that this is part of your lingo, that in the court of Shem, which is something that you should be taking into consideration, because we are all Semites, and this is going back all the way to the sons of Noah. We're being told that they already issued this ban on prostitution. So again, not prohibited, but recommended, improper conduct. And then there's like all the other elements to that, though. Like, yes, with the prostitution, you'd be dealing with talking dirty and indecent subjects. With the prostitution, you'd be dealing with a woman that's not dressed properly. All those other lists of issues you'd have to be dealing with at the same time.
Okay, that makes sense.
We have Rabbi Malot with us, which is very nice. Hello, Rabbi. I hope you're doing well. I hope you had a productive week. And thank you for gracing us with your presence. Antonio or Sandy, any questions, thoughts, comments, disagreements?
Not that I can recall now. The only thing I can recall is the fish comment.
That's all that matters now.
I probably
within the Noahide context, with a semi-serious question, well, probably more than semi-serious, but probably goes more back to that place where you walk within community or you walk alone, kind of. So I have a lot of places in my life where I take this very seriously. At the same time, I was in relation with a Jewish man. I'm not Jewish. So, you know, and yeah. And some of the, you know, like I look at the conversation, like I go and still visit my ex. I set out a question last time where it was like, he was in a really ugly funk. He's laying there waiting to die. And so I sat, and he's got half use of one arm, and I sat and I held his hand with that one arm and held him steady for a bit while he talked to me about how he's waiting to die.
Right. So that's a beautiful act of kindness.
Yeah, which is how I take that. At the same time, when I was in the Christian context arguing with some of the Calvinists, and when I sit here and I'm learning very intentionally about if I know people who understand what following laws means, and I'm listening to people yell about how everything's been done for me at the same time, how evil I am for not following laws, and I want to come and find out how to do the laws right, in both camps, I'm also saying there is no part of me that does not pray that when I am dead and gone, and whatever comes, that I don't want to still be with Jack. And so I sit here and I read things on every side of my issue, and I say, there's a place in me that lives in integrity. And for all of the screw ups in life and the places that we could or could not screw up in life, I at least want to be honest about them. You know, like, I don't want to say, I'm going to sit and do 5,000 penances for having a deep love for somebody that I shouldn't have been with. I'm not going to do that. I'll face God. I'll have the conversation when it's appropriate to have it. I trust that if I'm in this community and I ask difficult questions and I should be called on them, that will happen, like you said, when you were going through the divorce and other context, and you said, I'm trying to phrase this in a kind way. How do I say to people, I want you to be as honest and follow your own integrity with the exact level of integrity you should have before your God and before people? And if you got to say stuff to me, say it. And I may or may not answer the way you want because I've made choices in life. I don't plan to ever get married again. If I wasn't in the position I'm in, I probably would because, hey, it was nice. But I'm sitting in this conundrum. And I've known a lot of conundrums to sit in my life, I want to live the conundrums with integrity. And I would like the chance, at least, that God would say to me, yeah, no, I knew you guys were going to be together, and this is how it fits. And I can't advocate that and wouldn't advocate that for anybody else in terms of any of what we're doing here. But I go away every week and I think about stuff. And last week I told you I had trouble with 2 chapters last week and this week. Am I choosing to be alone? That's what I thought. I'm not stupid.
First of all, I should say that you have to recognize what you are aware of now is not what you were aware of then. And the master of the universe, fear not. He knows to see exactly into your soul, into your context, into your mind, where you are, and he loves you dearly. Okay? This is not someone that is going to be like, oh, I wasn't aware of that point. He's very aware of your context, and there's zero judgment, at least I believe. There's a term called the tinok shenishba.
I have no issue with God where he judges me. The one thing I've gone through life saying is the only thing I cannot afford to lose in life is God. I don't have an issue with God and my relationship with God and whatever he would want to say to me.
Right.
Like, that's not the question. But I've always had a little bit of difficulty with communities. Because communities,
if you're gonna, that is, I mean, hence why I recommend, if possible, even in this little corner, that the Noahide community work together and try to cultivate some sort of community where you don't have to feel outward. There's a place where you feel welcome, and there's a place where you feel loved and seen and accepted. And that is something that you're slowly cultivating, and that's difficult. And we know that it's also specifically very difficult for the Noahides to feel so alone, right? And not to only be able to connect online, so to speak, but rather have communities where you could have support systems for yourself. I would say, though, living in a Christian community and not playing according to those roles obviously are going to bring back pushback. And am I choosing not to get married? It's difficult. There are many dynamics in play, Sandy. There's where you are, where he is, where your kids are, what that means for them. So
my choice of not getting married is more my relationship with Jack, our understanding between each other, and the things that we said to each other. And so if there is a 1 point of anything chance that I get to be with him, I don't want to insert somebody in between that. That's the only thing. It's not got to do with all of this.
So to that, I would say that from a psychological and emotional point, I completely understand you. And I believe that God is understanding. And that's what you're saying. Like, that's what I want. So do I think the master of the universe will punish you? A, I don't know. And B, that's not the relationship I have with my maker. Having said that, we are called for a higher calling. and I say this to all humans, even the Noahides, of course, or especially the Noahides. So knowing what you know now and saying that, like, but that's still the love I'm interested in, right? Then that's a choice that you're making. And you are it's forbidden fruit at that point, because now again there's all that context behind it. So do we think that God could be understanding? Of course. Is there what he wants for you? Assumingly what we just read was what he wants for you is to be fruitful and multiply and love and have a relationship. You could be like, well, I was fruitful and I did multiply and I had my children. So first of all, you're right. There's a lot of those things that you've already done. And that's amazing. And God's thankful for that. And we have a beautiful another 2 creations made in God's image, thanks to you. Right. So I would say you are potentially in a different boat right now because some of these things were already happened. Can I return right now and still give myself a marriage? Can I give myself a life? Right. So that's something else. And just because this is something that's more personal to you, we don't have to get into too many details, but there's a relationship that doesn't involve a physical relationship, right? And that would be a place where a Noahide could feel more flexibility to say, like, okay, Chazi, in my case though, as long as I'm not having a relationship with him, a sexual relationship with him, maybe I could still be with him and I could be comforting him and I could still love him. And to that I would say, you can.
Oh, and yeah, I would never be saying I would go back to my ex. That is not a given. That's
so are you asking me now?
The most healthiest person in the world? No, that's not a given. That would never be.
If that's the case, Sandy, then God bless your relationship and don't second guess it, because you're not doing anything problematic.
If I meet somebody in the future, like, I mean, it would have to be something God talked to me about. We talked when I left my ex. We talked when I met Jack.
So ask him, as we do all the time, to shine upon you. And if that moment comes, that you'll have the clarity of mind and understanding of how to act. See you later, Antonio. We're wrapping up right now. Anyway, of course.
Yes. That was not a please problem solve my life question. It was more of this is a hard thing to explain to people. And I'm not sure if I need to or not in a Noahide community, or even with, like, I'm going on a retreat with Christians next week.
So I don't think you have to feel the need to explain it to people. And I'm letting you know that you should try to cultivate a place where you feel loved and seen by the community. And also realize that even from a religious point of view, right, it's not so clear that what you're doing right now, right, is like we're saying over here, to have relations with a woman, right? Forget what was, because that was pre your
conversion to Noahidism.
Well, you're not converting to Noahide. You are a Noahide the second you open up your relationship
Acceptance.
to God. And so that's a new you. And now with regards to your specific dynamic, it's not a problematic one.
Yeah. That's kind of like, that's my relationship with God, is that it isn't. Yeah, but there's a lot of people in the world. So I was just curious.
Very well. Thank you for sharing, of course. Kirk, thank you for participating. And we will continue on.
Thank you, Hezi.
With chapter 7.
And
Thanks.
chapter 7 deals with what laws?
Chapter 7.
So Choshen Mishpat.
Laws against robbery.
That would be Choshen Mishpat type.
Part of, yes, correct. And let's just see. This is going to be probably, let's see, 5, 11, 12, 19. Right. So this is probably going to be 1 till 27, 28. We might split this one up. We'll see.
Yeah.
We're halfway there. All right. We will be in touch. All of you, take care. Have a fantastic week.
Thank you. And
anything else comes up, do not hesitate to write, ask.
I might send you some questions, because, like, I'm looking at some of the Noahide connections in Canada, and I am way more blessed hanging out on Jacob's channel with all the people that I know here. When I listen to some of the things that are out there, like, because, like, that's one of
Rabbi
the guys.
Shulman?
Yeah, there was one of the talks, and I was like, ooh, yes, but yeah, the the way that we are learning the kind of instruction, it feels a lot less confusing, even if we ask you horrendously difficult things. And I know that you've got the connections via the Noahide Center, and I looked them up and they seem to. So some of my questions are in terms of, yeah, it's like, do I hang out on Jacob's channel or over on Brit's meeting? There's different dynamics is what I'm getting at.
Definitely. And these are the words of the living God, right? So
Yeah,
you could have the idea is to hold attention. And Rav Shulman says this specifically. He believes that there's only the 7, right? He'll say Rav Weiner says you could do more. I don't think so, but Rav Weiner is completely a legitimate source and you could do so. He specifically comes out against different Noahide groups that he believes are Christian Noahides, for example, that have like there's something else at play over there, or there's someone that has a channel going through all of Brit Olam, but all from like a Christian perspective and how he brings Jesus.
I saw that.
So
I think I saw that, and the gentleman that seems to be the main contact when I looked them up online in Canada is a gentleman from BC who used to be in media, used to be a church. I don't know if
he's apparently he's legit.
Okay? Yes.
So
okay.
I don't know if he's necessarily the problem. I'm talking about other people.
His reply to me was a little bit because I wrote to him asking before we started all the classes, and I said, I understand that you are with this, and I have some questions, and he didn't just answer the questions. He started talking because I said, do you know about the other group in Jerusalem? There's two training schools. And instead of just giving me the rundown on this one as opposed to the other one, he talked about some of the maltreatment he had received from people and seemed to need to vent a little bit. And I was like, oh, okay. So he needs to vent a little bit.
Listen, there is drama within the Noahide communities.
Yeah.
Some believe that like they'll learn according to one source and they say like, how can you do the other one? Like there are some that say, we definitely don't want any Noahides, let's say, keeping the Sabbath. Now, some that say like, but my rabbi said I can. And then the other Noahides look at them like, in a very strange sense. These are the birthing pains of like a system that went missing for thousands of years and now is being reawakened. So there's going to be tensions. People are going to be demanding that it's theirs. If you speak to him again, I would just mention that
I might
I would just say you should frame it under the rubric of I am. You could say I'm doing this through the Noahide World Center under the teaching of Rabbi Shirky, right? Rabbi Shirky is the one that developed the book. Rabbi Shirky is the one that, like I'm saying, that's his mission. Now he would like all the Noahide groups to all look at the World Noahide Center as the mothership, as the point of orientation, because it's coming from Jerusalem. Having said that, he's not looking for everyone to be teaching the same thing.
Right. And this gentleman in BC, is he with the same group here as Rabbi Shirky?
I want to make sure we're talking about the same person. I'm blanking out.
I can tell you his name if I look it up.
Igbar, what's his name?
No.
He has glasses.
Oh, shoot. Hang on one second. Oops, not that one. I think, did I write to him there? No, I might have written to him there. I've got 2 emails. I want to say it's a very North American name. Let's just put Noahide in.
You know where I should have it? I should have it here.
And then, quite honestly, in terms of sometimes I ask you tough questions online, but Dan of the Noahide Academy on Noahide Academy of Israel.
1 second. Let's see. Noahide Academy. That's you have over there Moshe Weiner, you have Dr. Michael Shulman, Moshe Peretz, Asaf Studowitz, and Dr. Shimon Cohen. I'm talking about Rod Reuven Ryan.
Dan Barwell from BC. He said he refers to it. He said I can send you what he said anyway.
Yeah, so him, if he's from the Noah Academy, you sent it in the comments.
Chat.
Where is that?
Let's see. I gather he's not. He said, on the surface, their rabbis have all the credentials, with the head of the academy being Rabbi Moshe Weiner. He is the author of the book, The Divine Codes, Many Noahides Holds as source material. The president of the academy. So he goes through all that, because I was asking about, what did I ask him? How about
That's a different group. So there's a group called in North America. There's Sukkot Shalom, there's Bnei Noach Academy, there's ICE, there's Nativ, there's the Noahide Academy, there's Brit Olam, which is what we're on right now. Now, there are some that are in few, like Tuvia Singer is in like 3 of these groups. And Michael Skobach is in 2 of these groups. Moshe Rabbi Weiner is in 3 of these groups, as in they reference him. Now, Rav Shulman is in the Noahide Academy, but he's also part of Brit Olam, and he's also part of Ask Noah. So there's different organizations that these rabbis some of them all work with. This other guy you're talking about, I don't know his name, but again, you
private chat there.
There is the Divine Code. That's another source. Currently,
this is Dan Barwell. I've put in private chat.
I'm opening it up. One second.
Okay.
Yeah,
so,
I know Dan Barwell, and Dan Barwell is associated with the Noahide, the Brit Olam organization. He studies in many classes with Rav Chaim Goldberg. Rav Chaim Goldberg is someone that I'm close with as well. So he's legit, and he does a lot of readings of. I think he has like Rocky Mountain readings or something like that. And he goes through the Kabbalah, Rav Nachman, things like that.
I feel like he comes across, this sounds absolutely terrible. He comes across as very Christian in his presentation in terms of some of the, how we do things in Christian churches. And he used to be involved in ministry and media in that context. And so he's probably got a dynamic.
I was going to say that is his language still.
Yes.
And more than that, what Rav Shirky would say is that's what I'm interested in. I want to take the quality things you've got from Christianity and elevate them through the Jewish prism, right? So like an Asian Noahide is going to be different than an Indian Noahide, is going to be different than a Christian Noahide. And each one of them is going to bring their own cultural flavor. And that's how we create unity through multiplicity. So it doesn't mean you shouldn't be cautious, because in theory, we are playing in places where you could potentially find missionaries, right? This is ample ground to find the spiritually lost and co-opt them in some sense.
Right.
So it's a good thing you asked, but he's a legit character, and they have this emblem like we have on the top right over here, which he does as well. He is associated with the same organization.
Good. The other thing in terms of what I brought up that sort of has me a little bit in tears ties into my where I stand with Jesus moments. And, because Jack and I would talk about, he was watching some of those horrible church preachers, asked if I was evangelical when we met. And both his wives were Catholic. His ex-wives were both Catholic. And I'm like, no, one of them was. I suspect the other one was, but I know that the one was. And so, I am, according to sound CRC doctrine and potentially Noahide and Jewish doctrine, very much in the undesirables camp in terms of how things are properly done. I was, as far as I knew at that point, it was a matter of, I thought he was a gift from God because I prayed for my whole life. And that's what Shelley and I talked about. And I may ask about numbers. Jewish numerology is not something I've studied or I'm really interested in studying, but at the same time, I have a personal, nonverbal, verbal language of something on the go that plays into dreams. Sometimes I'll talk to Yosef about dreams, and he's got me listening to Rav Joey Rosenfeld. Yeah, really, he totally, that speaks to me, what he says, and I don't understand half of it because it's in Hebrew. But and one of the weird,
that's what I mentioned originally, which is that's what Rav Kook is alluding to, why we're at the level of audacity, because we weren't learning what Rav Joey is teaching. We were still stuck at the level of just Talmud, and have to recognize at some point we need to dive in deeper. Unfortunately, Sandy, I do have to
go.
run off.
Can I'll ping you some questions. You don't need to answer them.
Go ahead, and we might discuss it again next week. We'll see.
No. Well, I've written to Rabbi Breitowitz because Jacob said to. I asked him what do I do with Jesus if I had this weird dynamic with God question promise thing going on, and he wrote back to me. I haven't told Jacob that, but I have told the rabbi on his channel that in direct conversation. Partially because I recognized the name of somebody that Rabbi Breitowitz sent something to me to read, and the guy's related to Jacob's rabbi on his channel. Anywho, so I'm fine. I'm not without direction on some of these things, but I feel like I don't want to be that stick in, that thing in the wheel that's going to upturn somebody else's cart. So I would like that sort of, the warning. It's not a hand slap, but in death warning. I would like warning if I'm not treading carefully. I don't want to be throwing fish questions at you. You know what I mean? I'm like,
that's totally fine. However, realize and be comfortable in the fact that this is right now search mode and learning mode. And in learning mode and in search mode and in the class, in theory, there's wrong questions, but like even Kirk's question about the fish, it's not a stick in the wheel.
No, but we're online and we don't know who's going to watch it. And
I understand. And that's why I would respond, I will, first of all, noted, if I think like it's going astray or it's going the wrong direction, I will reroute.
In my church context, I had people who would kind of say, very interesting. Now, who would just kind of, I like to know that people around me will be blunt when needed in times when it's, this might not be an issue, but could we talk about it later because, like that.
You got it.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And you have a wonderful day.
My pleasure.
Bye.